Okay, good evening, folks. We'll begin. So welcome to week 4. So semester is really flying. So in 2 weeks, it will be week 6, which is basically half of your semester. So I want to urge you to try to keep your readings up at a steady rate because you're doing other subjects. So when it gets to week 6, 7 or so, or 8, you're going to be inundated with all of the coursework and other things. So as I suggested, I don't know if you took my advice, but most of the heavy reading should be done in your first 6 weeks to avoid a lot of stress. So I hope you would have considered what I said to be meaningful. So today we're going to do a number of things, use a number of mixed approaches to teaching this subject, which is very practical, right? Recruitment and selection are two topics that are very practical. So we'll wrap up the lecture on HR planning because we started that last week. So I'll do just a quick review of that. And then we would look at the start recruitment today. We should be able to finish recruitment today. And then what we'll do next week, we'll go on to look at selection and possibly start to look at leadership. So there are a number of resources for HR planning. There are some notes, articles for you to read that are there. I uploaded the recording for HR planning from last week and also the culture lecture, so you have the two of those. Also, for this week, with recruitment and selection, the resourcing function. There are a number of readings that I would like you to read in preparation for next week's class, which are these ones looking at the competency-based recruitment and selection, barriers to recruitment and selection, auditing recruitment and selection. So the number of readings so that you can, widen your scope beyond the notes. The PowerPoint notes are just guides, so this is some additional readings. There are a couple of videos you look at, some short videos with different speakers giving different perspectives on recruitment and selection. And so in terms of a case study, I want you to just look at the Tesco. It's a 2 or 3 page study of Tesco that comes out of the UK. So you can read that case study for when we go on to talk about selection next week. And this is another, just a link looking at tips for effective recruitment. As I said, today we're going to look at Hillary Franklin, which is a very interesting case that deals with I consider a significant issue related to recruitment and selection. And these are some upgraded, if you had the old notes, these are some upgraded notes that I put up, understanding recruitment and employee selection. So I suggest that you look at these notes that we have there. Yeah? So as I said, we'll finish up HR planning, do recruitment, and then we'll pick up on selection and lead it for next week. Right? And possibly we might start leadership. Any questions? Everybody's okay? Any questions? Tracy, you okay? Everything is good? So what we'll do, as I said, we'll break around 1/4 past, 1/2 past, so you can just meet with the groups, to just get an update how you're getting through. So let me see this one. So if you remember from last week, we said HR planning has 4 key phases, which are, Tracy, the phases of HR planning are, sorry? Anybody? Without looking at your notes, Donna. Situational analysis. Sachia, you remember? Situational analysis.
First of all, you look at your current situation, then at your long-term goals, where you want to go.
Yes.
And then for your demand in order to achieve the goals, and then you have the assessment whether you have a gap or whether you're good.
Yes.
Or
right. So I said, so you do your environmental assessment, situational analysis, then you do your forecasting demand. what is the demand based on my goals and my targets and my mission. So based on where the organization wants to go strategically, as we said, you assess to determine what might be the demand to consistent or aligned to those goals, and then you do an internal assessment of supply. Then you do the scenarios, compare demand and supply and where they fall, which is what we will look at today more, the kind of options that you could have, and then you do some kind of action planning after that, right? So we would have those phases. We gave a definition, which helps in sourcing people, and we looked at the relationships that HR planning is related to recruitment, selection, HR development, compensation, staffing adjustment. So it's really interrelated to a whole set of your other HR functions. And we looked at, as I said, we look at the phases, and then the definitions of terms. Excuse me a bit. So requirements, demand, availability, how many people you have that may be able to fit into particular roles. Sorry, I'm going backwards. So you have your employees in, and that is where you're hiring people coming in from to the organization. You might have promotions, internal transfers, and then employees out. That is, sometimes you need to reduce your labor force. And so you have turnover, terminations, retirements. I don't think I see attrition. Attrition is one. Anybody can tell me what's attrition, Donna? Sorry? And what happens?
You don't replace.
Right, and that's a key thing you can't forget when people leave and you don't replace them. Now, one of the things that would be very critical in the process of HR planning, and that is when you do the supply assessment, and I think we touched on this last week, I'll just look at it briefly, and that is you want to be able to do an assessment of your current human resources to find out what are the competencies, what are the core skills, abilities that people will possess. And based on those core skills and abilities, the organization will make a decision where there are any gaps, and based on the gaps, they might then take action to remedy those situations. Right? So these things would help an organization identify what we call the core selection criteria. And the core selection criteria are those things that the organization would look for, or we can call it CSR. Right? So these are the critical knowledge, skills, abilities, experiences, aptitudes that each employee should possess for a job. So for each job, you will have core selection criteria for each job. So if you have 3, 4, or 5 core selection criteria, right, we can categorize it. So we can say category 1, experience, and we can say must have 5 years experience. Right? And 2 could be qualifications. So we can say the person must have a BSc degree in management, right? A degree in management, and then we can start to indicate some specific technical skills. Right? So we can say IT, you can determine are there any particular IT skills, whether knowledge of Excel or any customized computer software. If it was in architecture, I think AutoCAD or something like that, I gather would be one of the specialized software packages. So you can determine what specific skills you need in terms of using technology or other skills the person might have. So you determine all the criteria you're looking for. If you want to be specific, suppose it's a managerial position, you can indicate You want the person to have some kind of ability to lead a team. So that might be one of the specific things you want to be able to identify. So when you have identified your criteria, you can then allocate weights. So you can then determine out of 100, if years experience is very important, you can give it a weight of 30. It's one of the most important. You're saying qualifications also important. You can determine whether you want the qualifications. If you say it's more than the experience, so you can determine qualifications is worth 50. So that's 80, 20 left, and you can determine the IT skills 10 or 10. Right? And this is a total of 100. Or you can change to determine the experience is more important. So you might want to put experience up 40% of the way. You can then bring this one to 30, which is 70, right? And then you can determine, we will change this one, right, to 20, so you'll have 40, 30, 20, 10. And you can change the weights. It's just the organization just needs to determine which ones are most important. And then with this now, what you do is a rating system. You can have a rating system on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. So if a person gets a 5, you just multiply the rate by the weight, and then you have a total weighted score. So this is a very simple version of making sure if you do an interview or you're doing an assessment, it is not based on anybody's personal feelings. These are the criteria that you're going to be guided by. Right? If the job involves crisis management and you want that to be a critical one, you can determine the ability to function in crises. Right? Looking at crisis management. So you can be very specific. Having crisis management skills, and you just would then have to spread the weights differently. But we call them the core selection criteria, which are for each job, you need to determine the core selection criteria. So as jobs become more complex and more sophisticated, of course, the core selection criteria become a little more complex and a little more sophisticated. Now the link is when we look at recruitment now, is these core selection criteria are the things we look at when we go to recruit. But it begins in HR planning, when, as we said, we would have drawn the link to the company's strategy, right? So you would have drawn the link to the company's strategies, their goals. I can even add, you can draw the link to the mission, right? And you can link it to the HRM and its own strategic goals. So the alignment would be based on the organization, say, wanting to increase sales by 10% each year. Right? That's a strategic goal, to increase sales across the company by 10% each year. HR has now to align itself that if the company wants to increase sales by 10% each year for the next 3 years, HR must have goals that are aligned and complementing the organization's goals. So if it requires additional sales staff, right? If it requires sales staff, the company has to make a decision, where would I get these additional sales staff? And then it can work out. The same thing, what are the qualifications for the sales staff? A BSc, a degree in marketing, a degree of diploma in sales. How many years experience? Do you want very experienced people? 15 years experience because you want high flyers, right? You can say a proven track record of high sales volumes. You could also add that, proven track record of high sales. So again, the criteria would change if it was a sales job. So the point we're making, based on the strategic company, the corporate goal, and the HR goal to increase the sales staff, suppose you had to increase the sales staff by 20 persons. Where would we determine the number of persons you need additionally? Anybody can tell me? Where would that? Where would you determine, the company determine that you need 20 additional persons?
Where?
Hmm?
You mean which department?
At which stage of the process will that be determined? Sorry? But it can't be recruitment. At which stage will you determine you need 20 people?
Strategic starting, when you start to set your goals, your selection.
When you start what?
When you start to set your goals, the strategic and resources goals, based on the strategies.
But where will you determine you need 20 people? You don't. A goal is a goal is a long-term thing.
But, oh. When you look at your labor supply.
But that's the answer. When do you determine that you need?
But when do you look at your labor supply? When do you look at the resources you have?
But that's my question, Donna. To you. Maybe you're looking at HR planning. Yes, issue.
I would say that you come to the conclusion that you need 20 more salespeople after you did the assessment and arrive at stage 4 and see that you have an undersupply in the sales department and therefore you need 20 more salespeople.
Forecast.
Well, you said past four. What would forecasting help you to do?
You know how many you will need to get.
Sorry? Right? So at forecasting, would forecasting tell you the exact number you would need to hire? What would the forecasting tell you? It wouldn't?
But
Shouldn't
then
it?
how do you forecast it? How do you know?
Forecast that 20 people would slot in and fix the issue that you were trying to remedy.
Because you forecast it.
Because you're forecasting.
That's being planning, that's the same.
So not 10, not 15, 20.
So there are two stages, folks, right? Don't forget, you know. But that's the point, Peter. That's what HR planning is about. Don't forget, when you're forecasting demand, you're crunching numbers. It's just like in the classroom. You're crunching numbers, right? So you're looking at, if I'm to increase sales, right. So technically,
Equate to.
right. So you would look, all you would do then, so historically, what you will do, if you look in say it was 2017, you realize, right, that one salesperson produces 150 units of sales per week. And that's the average. So you just got to look at the historical data, right? And then you realize in let's put 2016, right? 2017, right? It took 150, so you can assume if one person does 150, if you had 3, how much would it be?
150 by 3.
So that's what you do. So you could argue then, if sales are to increase by 10%, how many units would have to be sold to have your sales increase by 10%? So if you say it would be 10,000 units, you can then calculate 10,000 units, and you currently have a sales staff of 2,000, you can then calculate how many additional salespeople you would need to sell an additional 10,000 units. Got the company, so you have to basically get historical data on the company, right? So data from the accounts department on sales, then data from HR on how many current salespeople are involved to generate the number of current sales. So you could actually determine what numbers are projected. So the issue now, if on the demand assessment, when you're looking at historical patterns and you realize you need 20, there is another stage then in determining which the issue was going, whether or not the 20 will come, all 20 will come from within, based on the qualifications requirements, or whether you can fill 10 from within, and you really need to go outside. So what will tell you whether you can fill all from inside or out? Sorry? Right. Which stage of HR planning will you do that? The supply assessment. Because don't forget, with the supply assessment, you're really doing a skills audit of everybody, their skills, their competencies. So what you will do then, you take each individual staff member's history and you match it against the requirements. But if you have a computer system, an IT HR system, you can just do a run and it will generate the persons who fit the profile. If it is manual, you have to physically look through everybody's file and match it against the criteria. But with most IT and sophisticated HR systems, once you have the profile for the job and you have the selection criteria, right? So you would have done your job description and done your job specifications, you just do a run. If you supply, how many employees meet these requirements, and it will generate the number for you. And it would identify the names of employees. So and so is a good match. Peter is a good match. Tina is a good match. And it would only match those persons. So if it is really short, it would indicate that you have basically, you can only get you have 7 people in the department who are currently not in the sales department who can be brought into sales to fulfill that. If there's nobody in the company currently capable of doing it, means you need to basically look outside then to hire. Okay? And that's where you do then, as you were saying, the demand and supply analysis. Based on the demand, let's match the supply, and then we make a decision of how many people can fit and fulfill the demand that we have. But there are complications. Yes, Tracy.
I was just going to ask you about that. Because, for example, if you take the complications, if you take people that you find that there are people in the workforce, the existing workforce that can fill these positions, but then you're taking them from other jobs, you now have to find possibly people to replace them, and it might be more cost efficient to recruit new salespeople than to train people to do the job that you're currently doing and you bring in.
And those are some decisions you would need to make. One, where do you give employees who might not meet the criteria in full, they might meet 80% of the requirements, do you give them the opportunity, right, Tina, to be trained that they can be maybe in 6 months to a year? But what would determine, Tina, whether the company can do that? What would determine that? That somebody is not fully capable, but within 6 months to a year, they are likely to be ready. What kind of conditions would allow companies to go that route? If you have a development program, yes, Peter. But no, listen what I'm saying. What would determine whether the company can go through, can have the 6 months or the year in preparing employees to go into it? That's it, Tracy. The urgency.
But also the complexity.
But the urgency first. I think the urgency first. In other words, do we need to have these people on the ground like now?
But that's what planning is so important.
Correct. Correct. So when you project, you realize, but if we wait a year, by the time these persons are capable, our competitors would have already beat us because you are improving sales, because you want to be able to increase your revenue and your profitability, etc. So I think the urgency of it, how critical it is for you to have people on the job in a matter of 3 to 4 months to be able to meet these targets. Right? So the company will have to make those decisions. Okay, maybe in the first year we might be a little behind, but we want to give our employees the opportunity to fit into these roles. So, so if the management is faced with that decision, right, it's a tight deadline. What might cause management to even delay the implementation, even though they know it might, in the short term, might not work to the company's advantage in terms of the immediate sales increasing, but they are giving staff the opportunity. So what internal conditions do you think would facilitate management making such a decision? Yes. Correct. Tracy on the ball today, man. Excellent. Yeah, it's culture actually, yeah. So if the organization has a culture of leadership where they are committed to giving employees the opportunity for growth, there's a tendency for those organizations to have a lot of promotion from within. So where vacancies occur, they prefer to train people internally. So I think government does it a lot. So in government, is a lot of give people the opportunity to be promoted to the next level, and then you can send them on training programs. But what's the danger of having 90 to 100% of internal promotions and filling vacancies? What's the danger, Peter? Yes, is that you?
Yeah, well, you have lack of knowledge from outside, so you might be too like short-sighted, and you're not looking for answers outside of your own organization.
Correct. We call it inbreeding, right? So you could actually find a kind of inbreeding where the organization just starts to think within its own narrow confines. So it's also good sometimes to get fresh new ideas and fresh new people coming into the organization. You see? So it's good to give people the opportunity to grow, but you really sometimes need to open your door and bring in people that is not people not part of the culture with fresh ideas and maybe a fresh enthusiasm and set of energies that they're coming with. So please note, folks, the core selection criteria are going to be critical when we start to look at recruitment very shortly. Now, these are some options. The supply exceeds demand. Did we go through these last week? Anybody can remember? We didn't? I can't remember. Yeah. So we can go through quickly. So if labor supply exceeds demand, it means that you have, when labor supply exceeds demand, so what's the HR term you use? You're overstaffed. Right, you're overstaffed. So you have pay cuts, reduced work hours. Why do you have pay cuts? Sorry? So you don't send home people, right? Yeah. So it's more to not send to retrench people. And at the same time, you will be saving money. Reduced work hours is a similar thing. Voluntary early retirement, we had a situation here with banks that are restructuring, so you encourage people to retire early.
But they may still need their expertise and hiring them out.
Right, which is the problem. So what is it? So if you allow people who volunteer to retire early to go without doing the appropriate supply assessment and the human resource audit, what are the dangers based on what you said, Peter? What is the biggest danger to the organization?
They won't be competent within that area.
Yeah, it's part of it. But you're allowing people who have been there for a long time to retire early. If it is not well planned, what is the biggest one of the biggest dangers? Let's hear somebody who hasn't spoken. What do you think?
You would be losing a valuable asset to your company in terms of years of experience and training that you would have put in them earlier in comparison to those that are left back after.
So what will you be losing? What kind of technical terms we use in the class so far? Right, distinctive competencies. Right? And there's another term that you use begins with I. It begins with institutional. Institutional knowledge. Because when people are with organizations extended times, they have what you call institutional memory. So it might not be things documented, but there are things that are critical to the functioning of the organization, you see. So even with early voluntary retirement, it has to be well planned. Work sharing, when I was studying in England, they did a lot of that. Is that big in Germany, Asia?
Well, we do have some part-time workers who share like one employee spot.
Right. What about Finland? Yeah, because I know what happened. I'm not sure if it's happening, but that was all back in the 90s when I was studying in the UK. But what you had like, particularly women who wanted to take a semi-career break to like have a family. So after the babies, or maybe toddlers, they agreed to work. So one lady would work like half day, right? 4-hour morning shift. And then you would go and collect your children from the school would only be half day, and then somebody else would have their child do a morning shift, and then they work in the afternoon shift. So with that kind of work sharing, that happened a lot for women who did not want to take a total career break. So it was a balance that you put in your 4-hour day, and you share that work with some other mother who really wanted still to spend time with the child or children, and you can take them to school, maybe do homework and things like that. And yeah. So I found it was a really nice system. I'm not sure whether it was there, but that was all back in 94, 95. But I found it was a very nice system of work sharing with a social dimension. We mentioned attrition. People leave, you do not rehire. Inducements to quit.
Why is that?
Sorry?
Are you frustrating people?
Correct.
And that's an actual thing?
Well, people do it.
Yeah. Legally?
Well, but as an inducement to quit, you know.
You saw it that bad, though.
Right, so you would basically say, so you would induce people to say, listen, but if you leave, we might give you additional 5% on top of the thing. You give them an inducement.
You're frustrating them and making them miserable while they're there.
Well, it's not only frustrating, I think it is that. You would give them, maybe we give you 2% over, a little 5% if you leave, we are prepared to give you 5% over what other people are getting. So you're just trying to encourage people that you don't necessarily want to stay to go. And that labor demand exceeds supply means that you are understaffed, so you do training and retraining, give people the opportunity for promotion, you try succession planning, promoting from within, recruitment and selection from within. So because you're understaffed, you can really, the intention is to give your staff within opportunities to grow, and you can bring in people at the entry levels. And that's what generally some companies try to do. Right? You can subcontract, part-timers, temporary. What's the benefit of subcontracting, part-timers, temporary workers? What's the benefit of that?
Outsourcing to someone that maybe
Sorry? So what's the benefit this year? Yeah.
I mean, if you're not sure how long you will need those additional staff members, it's easier to subcontract because then it's not your job to get rid of them if you don't need them anymore.
Right, correct. So if the demand might be a demand for the next 2 to 3 years to bring in full-time people for something that in 2 to 3 years the demand will fall off, you would then end up being overstaffed. So if you're not sure how long the particular demand will stay, people tend to bring in the part-timers, as you said correctly, that if for some reason the demand falls off after the first year to two, you could actually not renew because they're just part-time, and you're subcontracting, they're temporary workers. So they would not necessarily get all the other benefits that full-time employees would get. Labor demand equals supply. Replacements of quit from inside or outside. So there's not really a problem here. You have enough people based on the demand. There's not a problem there at all. So as I mentioned before, one of the things that has become very popular for companies that can afford it, if you want to do proper HR planning, is really to have good human resource information systems, but they tend to be extremely expensive, very, very expensive. And then in most cases, people buy them and they're really underutilized to a significant extent. So you worked in, you're from where again?
Antigua.
So where Antigua, is there a big utilization of human resource information systems there?
Not too sure.
Yeah. Where do you work before?
I actually worked at a call center before.
Right, yeah. And you don't know if they had one?
Not exactly.
Yeah. Peter, where you work anytime,
for credit union.
they had? Public workers, they had. But they should have one by now, though.
You would think so.
Yeah, no? Tina, where you work there? IT, the HR systems?
It's pretty much standard to have one.
The standard, right? You have the HR system.
They had one, sorry, credit union. They implemented it, 2016?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2016.
Right.
Caused the whole change in the culture. Everyone was complaining because they like the wrong method.
They happen. Yeah. Germany?
We mostly use interface systems from SAP, for example.
Right.
And just last year, we got a new HR add-on, so the employees are able to get their paycheck information and everything.
Right, yes.
See open close.
So you can access your own personal data then.
Yeah, and also new offerings of job positions within the company.
Right, okay. But for proper HR planning, especially if you have 10 or 15 people, but once you have 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 people, you really need to have an HR system to properly manage people, you see. But there are very few organizations in the Caribbean that would have that kind of thing. When we have a big organization here, I think we have maybe 1,500, 2,000 people. To have 3,000 is really a very big organization here, right? But I think the average might be about 500, 1,000, 1,200, which is not really big, but some of these international companies would have 20 and 30,000 employees spread all over the world, right? So that's HR planning. What we'll do, go straight into the recruitment phase. So remember, we are in the acquisition phase, which would be one of those critical phases in HR. So one of the things that is occupying a lot of people today would be the different generational gaps in the workplace, right? So you have the traditionalists pre-1945. Peter, that's you there, Peter? 1945?
Yeah, around there.
Right. The baby boomers, 1946, 1964, so I'll be part of the baby boomers. The Generation X's, 1965 to 1980, right? And then you have the Generation Y's or the millennials, the 1980 to 2000s. So I believe we have a mix of the baby boomers, Generation Xers, and the millennials, right? So I gather the challenge is now you're from reading the literature that the millennials have a whole different worldview about work and how they work and where they work and the opportunities for growth, right? So Antigua, so is that an issue home, the millennials and having different attitudes to work, different views of work, different work values?
You can say that because you find those that are from a old generation would be more, I guess, focused on what they want.
Right.
Whereas with the millennials, you find that they may do it because they have to, but that may not be exactly the job that they want.
Okay.
And later on, they may try to compensate for that by trying to get to where they want to get.
Would you say that age group more risk takers?
Yeah.
Millennials?
Yeah, risk takers?
Yeah, they're more risk takers.
Yeah, more self-centered too, based on everything.
Yeah, more?
Self-centered is all about you're more individualistic, sorry. That's what you say, not self-centered.
You agree? Tina, what do you say? Is it an issue? Is it not an issue, but is the debate in Finland also about millennials and different values they bring to work?
I think so.
Sorry? Seshia, what about Germany?
Well, yeah, I mean, you see a difference, but kind of remains the same that the older generations are still the leaders you
Right.
have to work with, so you kind of adapt with your own maybe opinions to the ones of the people who are in a leading position,
Right.
although you might want to self-express you in a different way, but it's not
Right.
always possible.
So the question is, are they generating so-called generational issues? With traditional, in other words, if you have baby boomers managing and millennials not part of management, is it creating tensions? Would you say it would create tensions, lack of understanding of the different groups?
If millennials were managing.
No, I'm saying if you have baby boomers who are managing millennials, from your own experience, do you see a number of issues being presented because of this so-called generational gap?
Yeah. Maybe
I know
time.
millennials might be like, but this is not really what's happening now. You should do X or you should do Y instead. Or try to give them their opinion, I guess.
Right.
also set in ways that they have come to know how the business runs. They probably get a little conflict here
Even
and
with
there.
technology,
Yes, Peter. Sorry.
even with technology would be an issue.
Right.
With the same situation where the example you gave of HR technology,
Right.
at credit union when they implemented that, people would rather just send in their CV and Word document instead of just clicking or inputting their basic competencies in their database and just sending it off.
Right.
Even applying for vacation, instead of doing it on a slip, a paper slip, physical paper slip, you actually did it in the system. That was the issue. Supervisors had to be doing it for the older staff. All that there was a big issue.
Yeah, that might be cultural too. Right.
True.
It
Your
might be,
culture is very unique.
sorry. No, I mean culture for the region. I think maybe.
I was bringing it home.
Yeah. Tina, you said, what do you say? Do you find a lot of baby boomers are IT savvy in Finland? Yeah, right? Germany is the same thing, says you?
I mean, depends. Some are, but some aren't, so you can't really generalize it.
Right, you can't generalize. So it depends maybe what part of the country we're talking about, yeah? Or is it education level?
Or also the organization you work for. If it's really IT intensive,
Right,
and also the baby boomers who work there are keen to work with IT issues.
right.
If you're at a non-traditional company with nearly no access to IT topics,
Okay.
then they might not be that interested.
So it's more organization specific then? Oh, yeah, okay. What about Antigua?
Similar to what Sashir was saying in
Yeah.
terms of it depends. It could be the education level and also what they're bringing in baby boomers. You can't really generalize, but you'll have a mixture that will be forward in technology. Some are not, but it just depends on what organization they're working with that may develop that competency and transfer it to others.
Right, yes. Okay.
Sir, what do you think when it comes to working schedules? The difference, you think there's a difference in there where millennials are more, for one, they're more flexible work hours.
I think,
it's
yeah.
more a case of once they get the job done and meet the targets.
Yeah, but based on the literature, I think the literature is suggesting that they want a lot more flexibility and less micromanagement. You know, so a lot more autonomy, a lot more flexibility. You see, and more creative jobs, more creativity, more innovation. That's what the literature is saying. You see,
That is more millennials or that
Millennials.
work environment?
Millennials.
Changing over time.
I think millennials, right? Because don't forget, you know, within another 10 or 15 or 20 years, the majority of the workplace will be millennials. You see, right? So the modern workplace will be dominated, like the baby boomers at some point dominated the workforce, both public and private. So it's not far off when the workplace will actually be led by a lot of the millennials, you see. So there'll be mature people, maybe in the near 40s, 40 something, near 50, managerial positions, owning businesses and things like that. You see? So the extent to which, since they're in those positions of authority, that they're able to reshape the whole workplace, that time will tell really, or they might just become traditional. So this is a definition that I crafted about one of the things we will distinguish is recruitment and selection, right? So recruitment is about attracting potential employees, and selection is about making decisions. So that's how we distinguish between recruitment and selection, because I know sometimes when we have these questions in the exams, students seem to treat it as one. But recruitment and selection, it is part of the acquisition process or sourcing, or some people say resourcing. But recruitment is just the process of attracting people, where selection is making a decision. So we'll just go through. And the important thing then will be the job fit, that selecting the right persons for the right jobs at the right time. The bottom part is what we said earlier, that it really now is linked to the vision, mission, and the strategic objectives. As we said, that whenever you hire people, they must be able to add value to the wider purpose of the organization. So these are just a range of external factors which influence the recruitment process, right? And that is the minimum wage laws, where countries would have a minimum wage law that you can't pay people below a particular one. Is it in Antigua?
Yeah.
Right, same thing. Finland, is there minimum wage laws, or it's just open, you can just pay what you want?
It's not in the law, but it's the unions.
Insist on it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a norm. It's a norm.
Yeah.
So what about in Germany? Sorry about
I
that.
think it's about 12 or 13 euro an hour.
It is
12 or 13 euro an hour minimum wage.
a minimum, right? So it's stipulated by law. Okay, right. So I gather most countries try to go that route, this minimum wage. Equal opportunity laws, that's where there's discrimination against any group, right? Discrimination against women, gays, lesbians, transgender, discrimination by religion. So I think maybe you'll find more in developed countries, you'll have a lot of these equal opportunity laws. There's still a lot of countries around the world that do not have these kind of equal opportunity laws. So I know for sure in the Caribbean, right now, we are the LGBT community is trying to now become more prominent, to argue we need to have rights also. So they argue about discrimination. It is something that is now coming into the Caribbean, but I know in other more developed countries, these are issues that would be discussed for a long time. Affirmative action programs, anybody knows what affirmative action is all about? What is affirmative action? What is affirmative action? Tracy, you ever heard about it?
I guess it would be something equal opportunity, where you probably discriminate against people so then you implement policies or regulations to protect people.
So,
I know if you're doing
Affirmative action program could, I'm just throwing this out. Is it in pertainance to policies that may be put in place in the workplace to protect those who are discriminated against?
right. So the example of the U.S., back in the 60s when the blacks were discriminated against in significant ways. So affirmative action is based on a population spread. That if you in your community you have X amount of persons who are of Caucasian origin, African origin, that you must, in terms of work, in terms of education, that must produce records to show that you are hiring people that are proportionate to the people who are within the society. Right? So people could actually bring civil suits against a company, argue that they were not following the affirmative action laws. Right? So as you say, it's trying to deal with discrimination. But I think now in the US there's a particular movement arguing that there's no need for the affirmative action laws to be put in place because that those issues have been resolved and it should be fair and open. So actually you're hearing a number of white Americans are claiming now it's reverse discrimination, that because of affirmative action, they were not able to get jobs or get into universities. I think they were saying Harvard and a number of those recently had challenges where a number of whites are saying, look, we were discriminated against because you have this affirmative action system that you must bring in X percentage of blacks. And because you brought in this X percentage of blacks, we were not able to get our rightful place, right? So I think the intention is good, obviously, in anything that you just need to monitor it over time. Work permits, legal right to work. Right? So again, you're coming into somebody's country, you just can't come, which is the issue in most countries. You need to get permission to work. So I don't know, in Germany, so work, suppose they wanted to come and work in Germany, what would they have to do? Can I just come and get a job, or?
My mom actually works for the government in regards to work permits, and normally they do like an assessment and look whether there are qualified people within the country before they let anyone from outside take the job.
Okay, right. So you have to, is it something published in the newspapers, public ad that we intend to bring in somebody for a job? How would they know that somebody in the country is qualified to take it up?
I mean, all the international organizations have their websites with job offerings, so
Right.
anyone could look it up
Right.
and apply. And if the organizations want a specific candidate to work for them, then it's assessed whether he's a fitting candidate,
Right.
whether he gets enough money, because it's also not allowed if the candidate gets less money for the job. So it also should fit that other people in Germany would get the same salary,
Okay.
so he's not exploited.
Right. Okay. Okay. What about Finland, Tina?
I'm not sure. At least, I work at a university, so we have a lot of non-Finnish people working there.
Right.
I just know that they need residence permits.
They would
I
have
don't know what
residence
criteria.
permits. They would need to get
Yeah.
residence permits. Right. Well, here I think what happens here that you have to get a work permit. But any company applying for work permit legally should publish in the newspapers, indicating that we could not find any local person or Barbadian qualified for this job. Hence, it's our intention to apply for a work permit. So it has to be in the paper for time. I know we said, Peter, about what, 3 weeks or something?
Yeah.
Right. So it has to be published in the newspapers that anybody could see it as a public ad, and anybody then, right, Tina, could actually write and apply. People can write.
They already have whoever
Right.
they
So,
want.
anybody could write and say, I think I am qualified for this job, and challenge it. Yeah. Anybody could write and challenge it.
They already have their person already in, so they're just waiting until the time go out to them.
So then when they recruit, what happens?
You go on first.
Well, no, I mean, you can do the interview, but you can interview everybody. But from the interview, you could conclude, yes, we interviewed everybody, but we found this person.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
everyone that applies for the job will go on
Interview everybody, right? But you can still select the person and indicate him, but look, we interviewed everybody and found that they did not meet our selection criteria, and you got all of your criteria documented, but you would just need to go, you need to inform the immigration department then.
But it has been
So how did they
effective.
not meet the criteria?
It has been
They are
effective because some people have agitated already, and there have been changes. If some of you may not know this, but Cable and Wireless had this many years ago.
Oh, they did? I didn't know
Yes,
that.
When Donald,
I know his name.
for some reason, then Donald Woons is coming up.
I know the guy, right?
You know what I mean? The last,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right. Right. He is the he remember it was mainly expats who filled that role, and I think the union was called in, and a lot of people had agitated that there were skilled Barbadians who could fill the role, and then he was selected. Right? It was.
But you really want to be working in an organization that didn't want you, especially at that level. So many people don't push it because they will support you with a hand.
But Donald got support from the staff.
So the question was asked, how could people not qualify? It's a very simple thing. What I put, this is what I put. 5 years experience in an international hotel.
Correct.
Yeah, and you only ever work here.
5 years experience in an international hotel.
You see that they went CDBs and enough
And
stuff.
cycling.
You want
That's
somebody
right.
with you want somebody with a master's and then 20 years of experience.
Right.
Between their
Yeah.
20s.
But no, must have worked in international, or must have experience working in multiple countries at an executive level.
So you know,
Essentially-
if we got 3 years in an international organization, in an international hotel, you can't
If it says 5 years, it's 5 years. Right. If it says 5 years, it's 5 years. So you can write anything. But no, but what I'm saying to you, any company, don't forget it's my company. I can determine the qualifications I need.
And who I want.
Right, so all you have to say is must work in 5 international in 5 different countries. So once I say that, I basically eliminated most Caribbean people. Sorry?
I was going to say that basically.
Right, you eliminate, right.
But the thing is, essentially the job description will be designed to favor the person you really want.
Yeah.
Right? Essentially, that's what's going to happen.
That's what you do, right? So you just craft the thing to suit the person you want.
Yeah.
No, but I remember when I was studying in England, because what you had, I don't know if it's still that way, but the members of the European Union, so a lot of students from Western Europe were studying at LSE, London School of Economics, right? So, of course, they could work in England, and a lot of you had assignments when they were doing the masters I was doing. But the interesting thing about them, where their career progression could be faster than me, because when they left the London School of Economics, I went back to France, in fact, I had a very good friend from Germany. So I went back to France, Germany, wherever, Sweden, working in England and working in France was considered international experience. So they can put on their CV in 2 years, perform 2 international consulting jobs. And that's what a lot of my friends did. After 3 years, they had on their CV that they work internationally. So they would work in England for a year, then they go back home to Sweden, and then they go to some other country and work, and they would put on their CV international, which is true. It's international experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm serious. So in 3 years, so where I'm in the Caribbean now at the same level, junior, in 3 to 4 years, they were working in top international companies. And that's the reality, you see. Right? So it's very easy. I didn't work in hotel for a while. Very easy. Executive chef, all they were saying, working in top class international hotels. End of story. You could protest all you want to protest. Because you, right? You see, how many chefs in Barbados or the Caribbean have worked in 5 international hotels or 2 international hotels? You haven't, you see. So it's something that is very difficult. It's very, very difficult to get around. Very, very difficult. Once you, I'm gonna say, people create the jobs for the people that they want. And in fact, in the Caribbean still, right? Most hotels hire international chefs from all over Europe, and many Europe. Yeah, a lot of the chefs in the Caribbean working are executive chefs are European chefs. Most of the hotels they bring in international European chefs. But I think it's changing recently where there are a number of young Donna with the food and wine thing. I think there are a number of young Caribbean people now actually who have gone out working on in Europe and all over the world, and they've really developed some very powerful international reputations, you see. But the paradox is that after they have gone and they've gotten that exposure, they have no desire to come home and work.
Exactly, because they're getting paid in
Correct.
currency.
Correct. Licenses to practice, what are the examples of that? Right, so you have a number of professions: nursing, architecture, doctors, land surveyors. Yeah, so there are a number of jobs where you really need to have licenses. So yes, insurance too. What's at home? What kind of professions would have to get licenses to practice?
What?
Usually everyone who has a profession has on-job training and got a license for that.
Yeah.
Electricians.
Electricians, I think here too. Yeah, yeah. Well, electricians here will have to have licenses too, right? They would,
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have to be like-
Right.
Security guard has.
Yeah, there's a security guard license that you have to renew every year.
There is. Oh yes, that is true. Yes, it is. Correct. Yeah, it is.
I'm not making this part.
No, and they have to get a certificate, police certificate of character, and they have to get their licenses renewed. Yeah.
I can answer that.
You will let me He may not know, but if it may be done on their behalf of their organization.
You gotta ask, brother.
Yeah. Go outside. You get that. You need bar licenses.
I know
If you
all
have
the
bar-
I know the government ones for sure have to be registered formally with license. G4S, yeah.
Especially immigration and things carry money.
So folks, so the good thing about this here is that you're really now looking at job performance, because the license to practice determines the minimum standard. And once you're licensed to practice, you could argue, I am minimum competent. Right? So nobody can argue that you're not qualified, because once I'm licensed and I paid my license fees, it means I'm competent to practice. So it's just a matter now of the year's experience or the interview, where you're able to convince the interviewer, I am the better candidate, because we are all qualified and certified lawyers. What they said?
No.
They don't have to?
No.
He probably does not know. Those security firms have to have a license to practice.
But
They will get
Firm.
for the security guards,
There has
right?
to be- there's a security
They will have to send the names, yeah. They will have to send the names, I think, yeah. The company every year,
Security governing body.
the government, no, right?
Yes.
You know what? The best answer to that would be bra. That's the best answer to that.
Oh, how about and
If you go like say you gotta pay fees. There is, that's coming in the newspaper, Peter.
No, this is what we were talking about. This is what we were talking about, that you can have recruitment at the local level. This is like in Antigua, you're just hiring within Antigua, or regionally, right? You're going to hire within the Caribbean. So I suppose, can we say that, well, the European Union, we can say that's a regional bloc? Can we say that? I believe so, right? Yeah.
You can work.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
local is like a German state, maybe.
Right. Yes.
And then regional would be Germany,
Oh, okay.
and then international.
So how would you classify the European Union then?
It's like, I mean, you could say regional is Germany or regional is the EU.
Or the EU.
Because for work permits, you don't actually need a work permit as
Check for the EU.
yeah.
Right, yeah. International again, so you can determine if you want to, which is, like I said, a lot of hotels in the Caribbean, when it comes to chefs, they prefer to hire international. Now, these folks there are two terms that you really need to be familiar with. And these two terms, the internal labor market and the external labor market, once you're talking about recruitment, right? So if you do industrial relations, or if you have done it already, I'm sure you would have come across these two terms, the internal labor market and the external labor market. So when we say the internal labor market, we are talking about hiring from within the organization. And when we say the external labor market, we are talking about the body of people outside the organization from which you can do your recruitment and selection. Right? So be familiar with those two terms. You can do some check on the web and just do up a little reading on the external labor markets and the internal labor markets. So we're saying in the external labor market generally, which is in your country or region, is the number of skilled, unskilled, and semi-skilled persons. So it's anybody who is of work age, unskilled, skilled, or semi-skilled. And then it also involves different ethnic groups, races, religions, and it goes on. And then the gender factors, all of these things make up the external labor market. And I would say the internal labor market is just a microcosm of that. It's just the people you hire within your organization now from the external labor market. So it is complementary roles that they would play. So we're saying labor market conditions would involve demand for and supply of specific skills, referring to HR planning, and the labor market for many professionals and technical persons are truly global. So the best way to look at this actually would be what is happening with the Silicon Valley and the big thrust towards information technology and technology companies. So a lot of the high-tech companies are driven by people from all over the world, and I mean all over the world, whether from Africa, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, Western Europe, Eastern Europe. Right? So that technology market is huge, and it's truly global. Right? It's truly global. Even though we realize you're getting the pushback from this movement towards globalization and global labor. And then this one on the power of trade unions, again, there are certain regions in the world or certain countries or continents in the world where trade union power is not significant. Right? But again, based on the Caribbean history, trade unions are very powerful because trade unions would have been in the forefront of getting away from the ties of colonialism and breaking all of the ties of British control or French control or Dutch control. So trade unions, because they were involved in political change in the Caribbean and then became the champions of labor, trade unions still tend to be, I would say, relatively powerful, even though I'm finding a lot of millennials, the younger people are saying, I prefer to go for my lawyer. So, yeah. So I think they're having little confidence in trade unions, right? They don't see trade unions, because trade union is based on a collective. Maybe I don't know your argument that they're thinking about me, but they prefer to negotiate their own legal terms.
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're finding, right? So you're finding in my day, trade union movement was big in terms of numbers, but now the trade union numbers are dwindling. In fact, the trade union numbers are dwindling very significantly. They wouldn't say it publicly, but a lot of younger people are not really interested in joining the union. They're not interested. You can tell them they're not interested. I can fight for myself. I can go for my lawyer. Right? Or I can fight my own battles, you see. So I'm saying it's not really a good or bad. It's just that they are different and choosing different ways. Again, our history would be coming out of the post-colonial. When I was born, it was in colonial days when the British ruled Barbados. But people post-colonial time, but people born in the 80s and 90s, they're not conscious about living under colonial rule. So if you don't know the days, I remember as a boy in school, when to celebrate the Queen's birthday, we had to come next. All schools had to come next to the road to Queen with the flag, the British flag, Union Jack, and say God save the Queen. Everybody, you line the streets on the Queen's birthday. So I knew I had to hold the flag and say God save the Queen. Yeah, I lived that. Yes, Tracy, I lived that.
So then that raises a question: the future of trade unions.
Well, of course, the trade unions are aware of it, you see. So, but the point we're making here, trade unions are a critical part of the labor market. So when you're hiring, trade unions want to get, especially for internal promotion, trade unions are very concerned that it is fair for workers inside to be given opportunity for growth and promotion. But right now, the trade union, the power of the trade unions is dwindling. So maybe if it continues in the next 20, 30 years, people just get the lawyers to negotiate for them.
But don't they have like trade? Some companies have been doing more like trade employee associations who operate similar to trade unions, but without the stigma of trade unions.
But isn't that mainly managerial or supervisory?
Committee. I guess it mainly.
Yeah.
A few employees.
Right, but I think it's mainly managerial. Right. So is trade union growth is still constant in Germany, or is it declining?
I think it's more or less constant.
Constant.
But we also have some within the companies we have some small unions of employees. So you can just complain with those guys who are elected.
Right.
And they have more power to the management than if I would as one employee go and complain.
Okay. Oh, okay. Right. Finland, unions are powerful there?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's something new. Yeah. Wow. So it's still constant, it's not declining?
No.
Right.
Very powerful.
Sorry?
They're very powerful.
Wow. Interesting.
Did you say ours is powerful?
No, they're not.
It does keep traffic backed up.
But Peter, but you had a national strike the other day and nobody came out. You know, you don't call a national strike and can't shut down the country. You call
Outside was hot then.
right sometime about couple when it was about early in the year. Was this year?
It was in summer.
That's true.
I'm
So-
sorry.
I think it was around summer because it was doing the internship.
No, summer no was
It was
recently
recently.
this year, yeah.
Yeah, this year.
So the one
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
No, no,
The
no,
one,
no.
the one, the one that where they utilize the port. that
the
was
NUPW,
the
right? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was the fact that because a lot of
The
people.
ports always are.
And they were planning to stand it up.
But it was supposed to be a national strike, but the country just ran as normal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, they just made the taxi man upset.
That was not a strike, that was a walk.
That's all they do. Fancy taxi.
So these are some forces, folks, that actually would influence. These are forces that influence recruitment process. And you see the first one, staff pressure for promotion. That trade unions normally push for internal promotion first. In other words, don't bring people from outside to fill supervisory or managerial jobs. You know, so that's a tradition I know we have in the Caribbean. So unions would push for internal promotion, right? And staff pressure for appointment from within. So you say, look, promote from within first. And I think generally in the Caribbean, this is what we see, these kind of push. And other parts of the world, I think it happens also. I think we are very big in this one. And qualifications and competence of staff. This is technically the thing you should focus on. And the ambitions of staff, if staff are really ambitious. And this is an important point they're making here, that the importance of recruits' expectation. And this is saying basically that there's a positive correlation between the expectations generated from the recruitment process and employee turnover. So to put it another way, what the research has found, right, and not in the Caribbean, but I think more in the North America and Europe, that if in the recruitment process and the interviewing process, the company misleads the employees to believe the organization is something it is. So suppose your organization has a lot of tensions with the union, right? There's some negotiations that were stalled for a while. So there are a lot of tensions between union, staff, and management. But when you're hiring somebody, say for a supervisory position, you never brought to their attention, you gave the impression that your organization is committed to staff and you have good relationships, you would have misled the person. So the person achieves the job, does the successful interview, is given an offer, accepts, comes to work, and within the first week realizes, well, they're staff, but there are a lot of tensions. There are tensions, I mean, you can't hide it, right? But once you start to work, you feel the tensions, and people might tell you, well, the union and employees been fighting management for something for a while. So they argue where the expectations are not met within that first year, those who will leave will leave. And they said that the research has shown there's a higher probability recruits whose expectations are unmet are likely to leave within that first year. Now, one of the things they also found that it is best, right? It is always best to provide accurate information on your company and operations, right? Do not mislead anybody. Or you have, right? And accurate information also on the job tasks to be performed. In other words, Tracy, do not in the interview process create a bigger image or a better image of the company than it has, because eventually the worker, the employee would come in with these expectations of this very nice organization with participative leadership. We allow you to express your views, to realize maybe one or two of the managers do that, but generally the organization's culture is far from that. But a lot of people do it because, especially if you know Donna is an excellent employee, she was working with your competitor, you know she's good and you want her. So some organizations really oversell, that's the way I put it, they oversell the organization. So in the interviewing process, the manager, bigs up and make you feel this organization is so perfect because they want Donna. So you oversell your organization, and when Donna is hired, Donna then realizes, wow, What organization did I hear about in the interview? It's a different organization. So provide accurate information, and especially about the job. Don't bend facts about the job. Be totally clear and transparent that people know exactly what you're getting into. Is that what? They didn't. Yeah. There's a link to individual employee issues, perceptions, values. Yeah. But when I was in HR practicing, I would do that. If I'm interviewing anybody, I will tell them up front, look, these are the good things about the organization, but there are some things that we are working on. So when you come in, or if you come, I'm sure you're going to experience, some attitudes. There are some managers who are disaffected. There are some managers who are very autocratic. But there's no sense giving the staff the impression that managers are participative, and we have this culture that our values speak about a participative management. When half of the managers are dictators, just be honest about it, right?
I've been to two organizations that have spoken about they need change. And when you see change starting to be effective, they
Push back.
aren't ready.
They push back. Right.
Because change isn't in isolation. Change permeates across the organization.
Right.
So if you change one area, all the other areas, the ripple effect is going to start going through. Exactly. So they weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
And I ended up being very frustrated.
Right.
But this is what you told me.
Yes.
Actually, what you said is true. Some big senior organization, remember this, they said that you're going to have casual days theater. Because you're going to get frustrated because you're going to be young and innovative, try different things, and you're going to be frustrated and beat down. So take the casual days. And then 3 weeks after working there, she sent me a job post at another company.
But that's good, though. It is good to be transparent and honest, because as Donna said, people would eventually find out what the organization really is. But as I said, I know people tend to oversell their organizations. You oversell to make it much more marketable because they want good employees. Right?
The potential employees will sell themselves.
Of course, employees oversell them. The same thing happens with employees. They oversell themselves, and they get people to write reference letters that are totally inflated. And the other thing about it, I don't know if it happens, Tina, in Finland, but you have some managers. Peter works with me. I just want to get rid of him. And I Peter has been, the user word has been very committed, and the literally mean has been. So what they do, they write these glowing references to just get Peter from around them. Peter is really a horrible employee. And people give references that are just totally bogus. And then employers use those references as the basis. But employers do that. They wouldn't say bad things. You call the employer. I'm going to call and heard Mr. Thing said that I can call you, that they go. And I told him I would like to, make a check with the former employer. He didn't have any problem. He said I can call. So I'm calling, to find out, tell us about him as an employee with you. Oh, well, he was pretty good, yes, a really hardworking guy. Yeah, and it really tells dishonest things just to get rid of the employee, and then people hire Peter, who just is a waste of time. I know maybe you have more legal framework. Is there more a legal framework in Finland maybe that could prevent that from happening?
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Somebody could sue if that happens. Or culturally it wouldn't happen?
Yeah, it's just, we're very honest.
Right, so it'd be a cultural thing.
Yeah, and also in Finland it's very difficult to fire people.
Oh,
It's a very strong, legal
process, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
And as you say, the unions are very strong.
yeah, employees are very secure.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to fire someone.
I better come to Finland to live. That's it.
References in general have to sound positive.
Yes.
So if you are not aware of the signal words, you as an employee sometimes think you have a great reference, but you could be wrong.
Yes.
So it's always good if you have a friend in an HR department, because those those
Yes.
people know the signal words.
Yes, the diplomatic language, yes,
And
yes,
show the reference to them.
yes.
And then they can say whether
No,
you
no.
should include it in your applications or not.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because sometimes they really sound great.
They sound great,
A
yeah.
friend of mine had a reference which was really, in my ears, it was great,
Yes.
but no, it was not.
It was not.
So the department where she was working for, because the HR department has written their reference,
Yes.
and then the department where she was working for at the time, they wrote another reference, which was way better.
Yes.
Yeah, because she had an argument with the HR department.
Oh,
So,
right, yeah.
yeah, it wasn't really an honest reference. But in general, they sound positive, and mostly the organizations, if you're not screwed up, they are mostly really positive. I mean, there are some which are really positive, and some are just okay. So
That's okay.
but
Right.
none are really bad. Just the things.
Right. Yeah. Right. So this is one of the critical things, folks, we want to get out of the whole process of recruitment and selection. Developing a recruitment strategy to ensure that the right people at the right time with the right skills can be placed in the right jobs, right? The right people at the right time with the right skills placed in the right jobs. So that goes back to your HR planning, demand and supply, right? So the right people will be based on the competencies, right? The right skills, sorry, and right people that you've identified a particular category of workers that you want to get. Right time is based on your plans. You need to have sales increase every year by X, so it means that you have time frames to follow, right? And the right jobs is that, again, your job is a sales job and not just randomly determining I need additional people. You really need to have a sound strategy as to why you really need people. So timeliness and competence, right skills will be the competence area. But timeliness and capability and making sure the persons you hire are the persons who have the qualifications, right? So the right person would be the person who meets, right person would be the person who meets the particular competencies or the skills required for a particular job. But of course, this does not account for nepotism, helping out a friend. You're in a service organization. We are all in the Rotary Club. Is there a Rotary in Germany too?
Yeah, or Lions Club.
Or Lions, right? But we have them here big. So normally you find these service clubs. You're a good Lion. You're looking after your Lion. Good Rotarian. So when the contract comes up, my Rotarian person has to be given priority. So this does not cater to where it is nepotism or friendship or somebody is helping out a colleague to get a job, right? Or Tracy's daughter wants a job and Tracy sends her to Mr. X or Mrs. X and they get a job for her daughter. So I think maybe more so in our tiny societies, 166 square miles, 300,000 people. So the likelihood that the friendship and nepotism can happen is much greater with our tiny communities where everybody knows one another. Everybody goes to the same church, the same club, the same dance club, right? Meeting the same social events, the Lion, the JC. So that's just one of the realities I would think for very small islands that it's very difficult to get away from the social ties that get people hired, even in government more so, but even in the private sector. A lot of hiring is done by people who know people who know people who refer people. Right? So a lot of recruitment is not really done by application. Right? Maybe you might advertise, but generally it's somebody who will speak for somebody or call somebody to say yes, good person. So I don't know if you can get rid of that in any near future. So then we have what we call some sources. The last thing we look at before we watch the videos and do the case would be, this is something you should also know too, the various sources and methods of recruitment, right? Because they're different. So the source would be the place where you can find qualified people, and the method is the means by which you go about to attract people, right? So the source is where can I get qualified people, and the method is how do I go about attracting people? In other words, getting somebody interested in the plan in the first case. Right? You understand? Right? So, because people have choices in organizations, especially those who are very competent. So, how can I attract people? So, we have the internal sources and the external sources. So, for the internal, it speaks for itself. It's current employees, right, from various departments. If your organization is a very big organization, it will be the various strategic business units. But then you have colleges, universities, job fairs, employment agencies. We have a number of the web-based companies that do a lot of recruiting. I know Profiles Caribbean does it. Computer, sorry? Catalyst too, right? Computer databases, the web, newspapers, magazines, professional organizations, walk-ins. People just walk in and say, I'm looking for a job. So those are sources. Even retirees have skills and capabilities you can tap into. And then the methods now would be internally the performance review, skills inventory that we talked about through the skills audit. And then the method could be a transfer, career path, career tournaments. And externally, you have the media ads, executive searches, etc. Networking, as I said, networking, friends, business, colleagues. So a lot of recruitment is actually done by networking worldwide. You know, where somebody could give a reference. Right? So you do the network depending on what social group you might be with, playing golf, playing sports, going sailing. So you can't really beat networking. And sometimes it's not a bad thing in that, you know, if you have somebody of integrity, they might know somebody who's very good. Say she's very good, and somebody wants somebody with first kids. They say, but I know somebody who's working at a company. She's excellent. Maybe you can interview her. So the referral is really a good, a very effective way actually of making linkages with people that people that are ethical, that are really helping you to find somebody in the quickest way, and not necessarily doing it because you want to help out a friend. So that'll be the different thing about it. So let's see if it can come out. So what I'll do, we will look at the video, and then I want us to look at Hillary Franklin.